The morning sun shone through the big windows of the small cafe on Trading Station Delta 7. The station floated in space near a bright blue planet called Kepler 442b. Inside the cafe, an old human man named Park sat at his usual table in the corner. He had gray hair that was getting thin on top, and his hands looked rough from many years of hard work. His clothes were simple, just a plain brown shirt and dark pants that had seen better days. Park held a white cup filled with hot coffee, and steam rose from it like tiny clouds. He read the daily news on his tablet while taking small sips. The news talked about boring things like trade agreements and weather reports on different planets. Park seemed very peaceful as he sat there, like any grandfather enjoying a quiet morning. The cafe was not very busy. A few other customers sat at different tables. Some were humans like Park, but others were aliens with strange shapes and colors. A blue-skinned woman with 4 arms ate something that looked like purple soup. A creature that looked like a big cat but walked on 2 legs drank from a tall glass. The morning felt normal and calm, then everything changed. The front door burst open with a loud crash that made everyone jump. 6 huge figures in dark armor rushed into the cafe. Their boots made heavy sounds on the metal floor. Each figure was taller than any human and wore suits that looked like they could stop laser blasts. Their faces were hidden behind helmets that glowed with red lights. The leader stepped forward and pointed at Park with one of his 4 arms. He was much taller than the old man, and his armor was covered in symbols that showed his high rank. His voice came out deep and electronic through his helmet, making him sound like a machine. Park, this is Commander Vex of the Galactic Council Security Force. You are under arrest for breaking Section 47 of the Galactic Peace Treaty. Everyone in the cafe stopped eating and drinking. They all turned to stare at Park with wide eyes. Some customers looked scared and moved away from their tables. A few aliens started whispering to each other in languages that sounded like music or bird calls. Park looked up from his tablet very slowly. He did not seem afraid or worried. His dark brown eyes looked tired but calm, like someone who had seen many difficult things in his life. He set down his coffee cup without making any noise and folded his hands on the table. What am I supposed to have done? Park asked. His voice was quiet and steady, like he was asking about the weather. You entered restricted space near the Zephyrian border without getting permission. First, Commander Vex said loudly. The Council considers this an act of war against our peaceful alliance. Park let out a long breath and shook his head slightly. I was just fishing, he said in the same calm voice I did not know. There were any special borders out there in empty space. Several of the security officers looked at each other through their helmets. One of them stepped closer to Commander Vex and whispered something that the other customers could not hear. Commander Vex nodded and looked back at Park fishing. He repeated the word like it tasted bad, in a military stealth ship worth more money than most planets make in a year. Do you think we are stupid, old man? Park stood up from his chair, moving carefully like his back hurt. He was much shorter than the alien security officers, but he did not look small or weak. There was something about the way he moved that seemed different from other old people, something that suggested he was more than he appeared to be. It was the only ship I had available, Park said with a shrug. And yes, I was really fishing. I caught some very nice space salmon before your people came and scared them all away with their big noisy ships. The other customers began talking louder now. Some humans looked angry that the council was bothering an old man. Some aliens seemed confused about why this was happening. A few people started leaving the cafe quickly, like they did not want to get involved. Commander Vex made a sound like grinding metal, which might have been laughter. Fishing, he said again. Right, and I suppose you just happen to have weapon systems and scanning equipment for catching fish. I thought those were fancy fishing rod holders, Park replied with a straight face. The person who sold me the ship said they were good for deep water fishing. One of the security officers stepped forward. Sir, this human is either very stupid or he thinks we are very stupid. Either way, we should take him to headquarters for proper questioning. Commander Vex nodded and pulled out a pair of glowing blue restraints that looked like they were made of pure energy. Put your hands behind your back, he ordered Park. You are coming with us. Park turned around slowly and put his hands behind his back without fighting. The energy restraints wrapped around his wrists and made a soft humming sound. As Commander Vex locked them in place. Park looked back over his shoulder. "How long do you think this will take?" he asked. "I promised my granddaughter Kim I would have dinner with her tonight. She is making her special kimchi stew and gets upset when people are late." Commander Vex stared at him for several seconds like he could not believe what he was hearing. Most criminals begged for mercy or tried to run when the council arrested them. But this old human seemed more worried about missing dinner than going to prison. "That depends on how much you cooperate," the commander finally said. "If you tell us the truth about your spy mission, this could be over quickly." Spy mission? Park looked genuinely confused. "I told you I was fishing. Do you want to see pictures of the fish I caught before you scared them away?" The security team started walking toward the door with Park in the middle. "Commander." Vex shook his head as they left the cafe. The other customers watched through the windows as the security officers put Park into a big black transport ship as the ship flew away toward the Galactic Council headquarters. Park sat calmly in his seat looking out the window at the stars. He seemed more interested in the view than worried about what would happen to him. The security officers kept watching him, waiting for him to panic or try to escape, but Park just sat there like a patient grandfather on a long trip, occasionally asking if they had any coffee. The Galactic Council Detention Center was a massive building that floated in space like a small metal moon. It had no windows and was painted pure white, which made it look cold and unwelcoming. Inside, the walls were made of the same white material, and bright lights shone from everywhere, making it impossible to hide in shadows. Park sat in a small white room with no furniture, except for 2 chairs and a table between them. His hands were still locked in the energy restraints, but he did not seem uncomfortable. He looked around the room with mild interest, like he was visiting a museum. The door opened and a new alien entered. This one was very different from Commander Vex. He looked like a giant snake that had learned to stand up and walk. His skin was covered in silver scales that caught the light, and his eyes were large and changed colors. His name was Interrogator Zell, and he was famous for making criminals tell the truth. Zell moved across the room in a flowing motion that was both graceful and frightening. He sat down in the chair across from Park and placed a thin tablet on the table. The tablet immediately showed a holographic screen with lots of information written in alien languages. "So Park Daiho," Zell said, and his voice sounded like wind through leaves. "Your file says you are retired. What kind of work did you do before?" Navy, Park answered simply. He did not look at the holographic screen or seem impressed by the alien technology. Instead, he studied his own fingernails like they were the most interesting things in the room. Zell's eyes changed from green to yellow, which meant he was becoming impatient. "What kind of Navy work?" "The question is not difficult. This and that." Park replied, still looking at his hands. Most humans that Zell questioned became very nervous in this room. They would sweat and stammer and try to tell him everything they knew, hoping he would be nice to them. But Park acted like he was waiting for a bus that was running late. "The ship you were piloting." Zell continued. "Costs more than most planets spend on their entire military. Where does a retired Navy man get access to such advanced technology?" Park thought about this for a moment, then looked up at Zell with honest eyes. "I bought it at a garage sale. The previous owner said it was perfect for long fishing trips to quiet places." Zell's tongue flicked out of his mouth, which was a sign that he was getting angry. "Stop lying to me. No civilian has access to military-grade cloaking devices, quantum engines, or the kind of weapon systems your ship carried." Park looked surprised. "Weapon systems? I thought those were just really fancy holders for different types of fishing rods. Some fish require very specific equipment. You know, the interrogation continued for many hours. Zell asked the same questions in different ways. He tried to make Park angry or scared or confused, but nothing worked. Park answered every question with the same calm voice. He talked about his small apartment, his hobby of building model ships, and his weekly card games with other retired men. Sometimes Park would ask for water or wonder out loud what his granddaughter Kim was cooking for dinner. He mentioned that she made the best kimchi stew in their neighborhood and that he hoped the interrogation would not take too long because she worried when he was late. Zell became more and more frustrated. His scales changed colors rapidly, going from silver to red to purple. This old human should be terrified. He should be begging for mercy or at least asking what would happen to him. But instead, Park seemed bored by the whole process. Finally, Zell decided he needed to learn more about this strange human. He connected his tablet to the Galactic database and began searching for Park Dae-ho complete history. The database contained information about every person in the galaxy, including their work, history, family connections, and any criminal records. At first, the search showed normal information. Park was 73 years old. He lived alone in a small apartment on Earth. He had one son who died in an accident and one granddaughter named Kim, who visited him twice a week. His neighbors described him as quiet and polite. But then Zell found Park, military records, and his silver scales turned completely white. The file was mostly classified with large black sections that said, "Information restricted." But what Zell could read made his hands start shaking. Park had served in something called the Navy SEALs for over 30 years. The few mission reports that were not classified mentioned operations across the galaxy with names like Deep Strike and Shadow Hunt. Zell realized he was not questioning a harmless retired fisherman. He was sitting across from one of the most dangerous humans who had ever lived. Zell stared at his tablet screen like it was showing him a nightmare. The information about Park kept getting worse with every line he read. The human military had sent this man on missions that were so secret, even their own government did not know. All the details. Park had been to planets that were not supposed to exist and had fought enemies that the public never heard about. "You are not just retired Navy," Zell whispered. His voice was shaking, and he could barely get the words out. "You are a Navy SEAL." Park looked up from studying the white wall. He said simply. "Past tense, I am retired now. Mostly, I just fish and spend time with Kim." Zell scrolled through more files, and each one made him more afraid. Operation Starfall had involved destroying an entire enemy fleet with just 12 men. Operation Deep Strike had saved a planet by infiltrating the most secure fortress in the galaxy. The Andromeda incident was so classified that even reading about it required special permission. You were part of the human military, most elite unit. Zell said he was no longer trying to sound tough or intimidating. Now he just sounded scared, like I said. Park replied, "This and that." The door to the interrogation room suddenly burst open. Commander Vex rushed in, moving faster than his heavy armor should have allowed. His forearms were waving and his electronic voice sounded panicked. "Sir, we have a major problem," he announced. The human ship, it was not just advanced. It was actively scanning our defense systems while he was fishing. Zell's eyes turned bright red, which was the alien equivalent of feeling sick. "What kind of scans?" "Deep penetration scans of our military bases, weapon capabilities, patrol schedules, and communication networks," Commander Vex reported. The data was being transmitted in real time back to Earth Strategic Command. Both aliens turned to stare at Park, who was still sitting calmly in his chair. He had not moved or changed his expression during their entire conversation. "Still claiming you were just fishing?" Zell asked. His voice now sounded dangerous. Park nodded. "Of course, the best fishing spots are always near interesting structures. Fish like to hide around big objects for protection. Your space stations and defense platforms attracted quite a few schools of quantum tuna." Zell felt a cold fear spreading through his body. This was not a mistake or an accident. This old human had deliberately entered their most secure space, using a simple fishing trip as cover for a military intelligence operation. The Galactic Council's most protected secrets had been compromised by someone who looked like a harmless grandfather. "How much did you learn about our defenses?" Zell demanded. Park shrugged. "Enough to know that your patrol schedules are very predictable. Your sensor arrays have several blind spots and your commanders take very long lunch breaks every Thursday." The room became completely silent, except for the soft humming of the air circulation system. Both aliens realized that their entire security system had been studied, analyzed, and probably figured out by one old human with a fishing pole. "What else did you discover?" Commander Vex asked, though he was clearly afraid of the answer. Park seemed to think about this carefully. "Well, your communication codes are not as secure as you think they are. Your weapon systems have some interesting design flaws, and your food in the officer mess halls is terrible. You really should talk to whoever is in charge of military catering." Zell tablet suddenly beeped with an incoming priority message. He looked at the screen and his scales turned even whiter. "Sir, he said to Commander Vex. Earth government is demanding immediate communication with their captured citizen. They are sending. A diplomatic ship commander Vex's electronic voice made a sound like breaking glass. How long until they arrive? Zell checked his screen. 18 hours, sir. Both aliens looked back at Park, who seemed completely unconcerned by this news. He was now humming a quiet song to himself and tapping his fingers on the table like he was playing an invisible piano. The interrogation was over, but the real problems were just beginning. News about Park arrest spread through the Galactic Council headquarters like fire through dry grass. Within 6 hours, representatives from 12 different alien species had arrived for an emergency meeting. The main council chamber was filled with creatures of all shapes and sizes, their various forms of communication creating a symphony of sounds that ranged from musical to terrifying. The chamber itself was enormous, with a domed ceiling that showed a view of the stars outside. Rows of seats curved around a central speaking area where the most important decisions in the galaxy were made. Each representative sat in specially designed chairs that accommodated their unique body types. Council leader Apex stood in the center of the chamber. His body was made of living crystal that reflected light and rainbow patterns, making him look like a walking gemstone. When he spoke, his voice sounded like wind chimes mixed with breaking glass. This human represents a serious threat to galactic security, he announced. The sound echoed throughout the chamber, making everyone pay attention. His espionage mission has compromised our most sensitive military information. Representative Core raised one of his 6 furry arms. He was a creature that looked like a cross between a bear and a spider, with 3 heads that could each speak independently. I say, we make an example of him. His middle head declared, public execution will show other humans that the council cannot be fooled. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the chamber. Many representatives nodded their various appendages or flashed bioluminescent signals of support. Several species had been embarrassed by human military actions in the past and wanted revenge. But Representative Kex, an elderly blue-skinned alien with wise silver eyes, stood up slowly. Wait, he said in a voice that commanded respect. Has anyone actually researched what Navy SEALs are capable of? The chamber fell quiet. Council leader, Apex crystal form, shifted slightly as he focused on Kex. Explain. Kex activated a holographic display that filled the center of the chamber with images from Earth military history. The display showed humans in training, performing incredible feats of endurance and skill. Human Navy SEALs are not ordinary soldiers, Kex explained. They represent the absolute peak of human military capability. They can survive in any environment, use any weapon, and complete missions that other species would consider impossible. The display showed SEAL training footage, humans swimming through freezing water, carrying enormous loads across desert terrain, and performing precision raids in complete darkness. The alien representatives watched in fascinated horror as humans pushed their bodies beyond what seemed physically possible. This Park Dae-ho has 40 years of experience in special operations, Kex continued. According to Earth databases, he participated in over 200 classified missions across the galaxy. His success rate was 100%. Representative Core Middlehead scoffed. He is one old human. What can he possibly do against the entire Galactic Council? Kex's expression grew very serious. According to human military doctrine, capturing or killing a Navy SEAL is considered an act of war. Earth government will demand his immediate release. The chamber erupted in nervous chatter. Some representatives argued in clicking languages, others communicated through flashing lights, and a few species that spoke through scent-released chemicals that made the air smell like confusion and fear. Council leader Apex raised his crystalline arms for silence. And if we refuse their demands, then we face the possibility of military conflict with humanity. Kex replied, and based on what I have learned about their special forces capabilities, that might be the worst mistake we could possibly make. A new voice spoke from the back of the chamber. Representative Zara, a insect-like creature with compound eyes and razor-sharp claws, stepped forward. I have studied human military history, she announced in a voice like buzzing electricity. One Navy SEAL team once infiltrated our most secure prison and freed their captured comrade without being detected. Another representative, a gas-based life form that spoke through vibrations, added, and human special forces destroyed 3 Krillian battle stations using nothing but small ships and creative tactics. The chamber filled with more worried discussions. Many representatives were remembering stories they had heard about human military effectiveness, stories they had dismissed as propaganda until now. But what if we keep him as a prisoner and simply deny Earth access? One representative suggested. Kex shook his head. That would be even worse. If Park Dae-ho dies or disappears while in our custody, Earth will assume we killed him. Then instead of demanding his release, they will demand justice. The implications of this hung in the air like a dark cloud. The Galactic Council had maintained peace for centuries by avoiding direct conflicts with major species, but they had just arrested someone whose death could start a war with one of the galaxy's most militaristic civilizations. Meanwhile, in his detention cell, Park was doing push-ups and planning his next move. Deep inside the Council Detention Center, Park examined his cell with the careful attention of a professional. The walls were made of energy barriers that hummed softly with power. The door required biometric scans from 3 different species too. Open and guard drones floated through the corridors every 6 minutes, sweeping the area with sensor beams. To most prisoners, this would seem like an impossible fortress designed to hold the galaxy's most dangerous criminals. But to Park, it was just another puzzle that needed solving. He had been in worse prisons on planets where the very air was poisonous. For 3 days, Park had been watching and learning. He knew that Guard Captain Yule, a lizard-like creature with poor eyesight, always stopped to clean his equipment at exactly 3 in the morning. He knew that the energy barriers flickered for exactly 1.2 seconds during the daily system diagnostic at dawn. And most importantly, he knew that the ventilation system connected directly to the main computer core. At exactly 3 in the morning, Park began his escape. Years of training had taught him how to create small electromagnetic pulses using everyday objects. He carefully removed the electronic monitoring device from his prison uniform and used parts from it along with metal threads from his blanket to build a tiny but effective pulse generator. The device worked perfectly. When the energy barrier flickered during the system diagnostic, Park activated his pulse generator. The barrier went down for just long enough for him to slip through the gap. Moving like a shadow despite his age, Park crawled into the ventilation system. The ventilation shafts were narrow and uncomfortable, but Park had crawled through worse places during his active service years. He moved silently through the metal tunnels, following the path he had memorized over the past 3 days. His joints ached and his back protested, but he ignored the pain. Within 20 minutes, he reached the computer core, a room filled with blinking lights and humming machines that controlled the entire detention facility. Park dropped down from the ceiling vent and immediately went to work. Despite claiming to be just a simple fisherman, Park hands moved across the computer interfaces with expert skill. He accessed the main database using techniques he was never supposed to have learned, and within minutes he was downloading classified information about Council military capabilities, political structures, and secret alliances between different species. But then Park did something that no one would expect. Instead of escaping to freedom, he carefully climbed back through the ventilation system and returned to his cell. He repaired the monitoring device, fixed the energy barrier, and lay down on his bunk like nothing had happened. When Guard Captain Yule made his regular rounds, he found Park sleeping peacefully. The old human was snoring softly, and his cell showed no signs of disturbance. What Yule did not know was that Park had already transmitted detailed intelligence about Council security weaknesses back to Earth Strategic Command. More importantly, he had planted a computer virus that would activate if anything bad happened to him. Next morning, Interrogator Zell arrived to continue questioning. But as soon as he turned on his computer, alarms began blaring throughout the entire facility. Red lights flashed and automated voices announced system failures in a dozen different languages. "What did you do?" Zell shouted as security officers ran past the interrogation room. Their footsteps echoed through the corridors like thunder. Park looked up innocently from the cup of coffee someone had brought him. "I have been sitting in my cell all night," he said calmly. "Ask your guards. They checked on me every hour. But Zell's computer screen told a different story. Their entire database had been copied. Their security systems had been mapped in detail, and a countdown timer showed 72 hours until complete system shutdown. The virus was elegant and terrifying. It had already spread through their entire network and was systematically shutting down everything from life support to weapons systems. The message was clear: if Park was harmed, the entire Galactic Council headquarters would become a floating tomb. "How is this possible?" Zell whispered. His silver scales had turned pale with fear. Park smiled. "For the first time since his arrest, I told you I was Navy." The Galactic Council emergency session looked like chaos in motion. Representatives from dozens of species filled the chamber, shouting arguments in languages that sounded like music machinery and natural disasters. Security officers ran between the seats, delivering reports that got worse with every passing minute. The main display screen showed system failures cascading through their entire network. Life support was dropping to emergency levels. Weapon systems were shutting down, and communication arrays were going offline one by one. The virus that Park had planted was methodically destroying everything they had built over centuries. Council leader Apex crystalline form was flickering rapidly between different colors, a sign of extreme stress. How did one elderly human manage to completely compromise our most advanced security systems? He demanded. Representative Kex, who had tried to warn them about Navy SEALs earlier, stood calmly in the middle of the panic. "Because we made the mistake of thinking that retired means harmless," he replied. This man spent 40 years in situations where making a single mistake meant death. Compared to fighting space pirates and infiltrating enemy planets, breaking out of our detention center was probably just a morning exercise. On the largest screen, a message appeared from Earth government. It was written in simple text that every species could understand. "Release Park. Day-ho immediately or face the consequences." The message was signed by Earth Strategic Command and included technical specifications for weapons that could destroy planets. Commander Vex, still trying to salvage his reputation after the arrest, argued loudly, "We cannot show weakness. If we release him, every criminal in the galaxy will think they can spy on the Council without punishment." Representative Kex shook his head sadly. He was never spying for criminal purposes. This was a military intelligence operation. Earth wanted to test our security systems. And unfortunately, for all of us, they succeeded beyond their expectations. The countdown timer on every screen now showed 18 hours until total system failure. Already some sections of the headquarters were losing power, and emergency lighting was flickering. In the corridors, several representatives began demanding immediate action. An insect-like delegate suggested negotiating with Earth for technical help to remove the virus. A gas-based representative proposed evacuating the headquarters before life support failed completely. But Council leader Apex made the decision that would save them all. "We will release the human immediately," he announced. "This incident will be classified as a diplomatic misunderstanding rather than an act of espionage." 2 hours later, Park walked out of the detention center carrying a small bag with his few personal belongings. Interrogator Zell escorted him to the docking bay where his fishing ship waited. The vessel looked harmless enough from the outside, just an old ship that had seen better days. "I still do not understand," Zell said as they walked through the corridors. "Why reveal what you are really capable of? You could have escaped without anyone learning about your true skills." Park stopped walking and looked at the young alien with patient, grandfatherly eyes. "Son, I am 73 years old. I have seen enough violence and conflict to last several lifetimes, but sometimes you have to remind people that choosing peace does not mean you are helpless." He climbed into his ship and started the engines. The familiar hum of the quantum drive filled the cockpit like an old friend. Through the main window, he waved goodbye to Zell like a friendly neighbor heading home from a visit. As Park's ship disappeared into hyperspace, Zell received one final message on his communicator. "Thanks for the coffee," it read. "Next time I go fishing in your neighborhood, I will bring my own supplies, and please tell your security teams they need better patrol schedules." Any retired SEAL could spot those patterns from 3-star systems away. The message ended with detailed coordinates for the best fishing spots near Council headquarters and a recipe for his granddaughter Kim, famous space cookies. Back on Earth, Park arrived at his small apartment to find Kim waiting with dinner and a dozen questions about his fishing trip. He told her the fish were not biting much, but he had met some interesting people and learned quite a bit about galactic politics. What he did not tell her was that Earth Strategic Command now had complete intelligence files on 12 alien species, detailed maps of Council military installations, and proof that humanity-retired veterans were still the galaxy's most formidable individuals. When properly motivated, Park Dae-ho returned to his quiet retirement, playing with his granddaughter, building model ships, and occasionally taking fishing trips to places that made the Galactic Council very, very nervous. And somewhere in the Council headquarters, Interrogator Zell was writing a report recommending that all future arrests of humans should include extensive background checks, especially if the suspect claims to be retired military.